Good morning, guys. Okay, it's a nice, wonderful 36 degrees out here this morning, and I'm out doing some stuff, but I wanted to take the time to answer some questions that you had put forth to me. With the recent event of the I-95 corridor event, and for those that are not aware of it at the time of watching this video, what happened was a few days ago a cold Arctic blast rolled into the deep south and then rolled up the east coast. And in Washington, as in Washington D.C., on the I-95 corridor, there was a major pileup. A couple of trucks jackknifed on the icy roads. And for some reason, the local authorities could not clear that and get the traffic moving again. And so some people sat in their cars in that traffic jam close to 24 hours. Now that is, I would say at one point, unheard of, but today it's not necessarily true. But what I've been asked about is preparedness for something like that, because we assume that our vehicles are going to get us through this. But let's take a hard look for just a second at what a vehicle actually is. Although we think of it as big and solid and all of that, it's actually a great big tin box, like a mailbox. And it's not insulated. If you've ever seen a car tore apart, you realize that inside the doors, the roof, everywhere else, there is little to no insulation. Cars are not made that way. They're designed to have hollow and chambers for crumple zones, but these are not designed for warmth, and so they don't hold heat well. In fact, they shed heat very quickly. And that's one of the things they want, because when you've got that car sitting in that parking lot, if it was in the dead of summer and it's 110 in Phoenix or something, they don't want the car to become such an oven that it takes an hour to cool it off. It has to be thermal transitioning very quickly. So there's insulation in the floor, carpet, but the sides are really just thick as cardboard with a little bitty something on them. There's just no real insulation. And because of that, once that engine turns off, that becomes a box really quick. Now, it does have one good advantage. You're out of the wind. For the most part, it does block the wind. However, cars are not designed to be totally 100% sealed up, because when you're turning the air conditioner on or the heater on or whatever in that fan, if there isn't some flow of air out, the fan can't really work well, because it can't force air into an enclosed box. Air's got to leak out all the doors and seams, so when that positive airflow from that fan goes and it kind of pressurizes the end time, it's got to leak at all the seams around the doors, around the windows, around everything, to let it go so that air can come in. Well, otherwise you'd have to always open a window to let the fan run. Otherwise it'd pressurize up and wouldn't work. And so because of that, it does let air in quite a bit. Now, my recently passed friend Dan Lutz, who one of his jobs had been running a snowplow up in Ohio. And he told me of an event that happened to him where it was around 0 degrees, and he lost a fan belt on his engine. Now, for those of you that are not mechanically inclined, when you lift the hood and you look down, there's usually on the front of an engine some sort of belt. Today it's a serpentine belt. But in a nutshell, it's turning things that are on the outside of the engine, letting the engine turn them. And some of them are like water pumps, alternators, air conditioner pumps, stuff like that, are ran by that belt up front. So when that belt broke on his truck, it no longer runs the water pump. The water pump is how the engine cools itself and how the heater works. It's pumping that hot water, letting the hot water flow into the cab through a radiator and back out. So if the water heater quits, water pump quits, you got no heater. And also, if the alternator quits, you have no ability to charge the engine. So rapidly that vehicle is going to die. Well, Dan realized this and found a place he could stop real quick, jump out and unhook his blade on the front of his snowplow and back the truck out. And then he called on the radio and called for help for them to bring him another truck. Well, they're going to do it. But how long? You know, someone has got to go to the shop, hook up the 18-wheeler to the lowboy, load another truck onto it, get it secured down, and drive to you. He said it was right at 3 hours before they got there, but it was below zero. And so he was prepared. He said, but once I turned that truck off, I have a thermometer in the cab. I want to see how long it took for that truck to cool off. He said it went from about 72 degrees to 0 in that cab in 24 minutes. That's how long it took. 24 minutes. And he's going to be sitting there 3 hours. Now, if you weren't prepared for it, you'd be in a world of hurt, wouldn't you? And that's what a lot of people on I-95 went. Because although their vehicle was not hurt, are you running out of fuel? You know, that's it. Did you prepare to sit here for 24 hours? Most people today, we live in air-conditioned and environmentally controlled homes and everything else. So I see all the time in daily public. It's not just because I'm here in the South. I mean, we can have cold temperatures. Last night it got down to 20 here. But I will see people walking in wearing a hoodie. That's it. You know, well, I'm only driving down the store. Oh, I understand that. And the second big fantasy is, hey, if anything goes bad, I have a phone. I'll just call. Well, those people on I-95 probably call too. But the question is anybody coming, or can they get to you? Now let's look at a simple scenario where you've done nothing wrong and you're coming home at night or in bad conditions and you simply run into, let's say, the road's blocked. Snow drifts have blocked the road, or ice storm has caused trees to fall in the road, whatever. And when you turn around to go back, you find out the road's become blocked behind you. So you're between these two and no way to get by. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nobody there. There's no houses or nothing. No place you can take shelter, but you're stuck in your car. And now you're going to call for help. The very fact that the ice storm has started napping off trees probably means that's going everywhere. And are you a priority? You know, you're not the only person in this county that's probably in trouble all at once. And if it's not inside a city limit, it goes to the sheriff's department nationwide. And sheriff's department usually are not that big a department. And so you've got 20, 30 people calling, you know, at the same time saying, you know, my son's stuck in this ditch, my daughter slid off over here into this ditch, trees are down here, power lines are down, my cows have got out and have blocked the road because a tree fell, and you know, and they're just inundated. So how are they going to get to you? How long will it take? So you have to be able to shelter in place for a point, for a little bit. And so that brings up, let's talk about what you should have to be able to shelter in place a little bit. Okay, as a minimum, I think you should have in every vehicle a Ranger roll. Now, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put a link up here to an earlier video when I went over it in depth, but this is a U.S. Army Poncho with a reusable space blanket and a woobie in it. That's three separate things all hooked together to make a blanket slash sleeping bag slash tarp slash shelter slash, you get the idea. Now, these are, for their size and weight, unusually warm, especially for something like that inside a car where I just need to trap as much of my own body heat as possible. This I consider the absolute minimum down here in my south. But now once you get up north, that changes very rapidly. But let's talk about how this would affect. It is a poncho, so it's rain gear. Okay, this can be taken back apart to its basic components. So it's a poncho, so it's rain gear, should I need that. I have the poncho that can be put up for a tarp. I also have the emergency space blanket, which can be put up for a tarp. I have the woobie, which can be wrapped around me for warmth or put back into the poncho for a pseudo sleeping bag, etc. All three combined together in one unit, more warmth because it's more barriers for the heat to get out of. But it's relatively small, relatively light, and there should be one of these in the trunk for every person. Okay, now here's the thing, and parents, I know that you're going to relate to this. You have that rebellious teen that all they want to wear is a hoodie and a pair of blue jeans. Ladies, let me tell you right now, the worst thing you can wear in the winter to stay warm is tight blue jeans. I don't care that they're your thick pants. Blue jeans become damp very easily through perspiration through our skin, and then they are useless for warmth. The U.S. military did extensive tests on all kinds of materials years ago, and their conclusion was that wool was the absolute best and that denim was the absolute worst material for keeping warm and holding warmth. And so I recommend you do not do that. However, I understand fashion dictates that I look cute in my little skinny jeans and a hoodie, but that is not very effective out here in such things like happen on I-95. So I suggest that when the winter months roll around, okay, make up a small bag, small little knapsack. Put in it at minimum a pair of really good polypro long handles, extra socks, and then a great big thick sweatshirt and sweatpants that can go over whatever else I'm wearing. That way I don't have to strip down and start all over, but I can add a layer to the outside. Okay? And then have some sort of roll or whatever that I can bundle up in the seat to try to buy time. Now, if it's going to be the dead of winter, it's going to be the Arctic type blast, this is not adequate. You need something bigger. This is a great big U.S. Army down sleeping bag. If it's going to be those kind of conditions, and with our modern technology, there is no reason for anybody to be so unwarned and unprepared is to not realize that, you know, next Tuesday they're showing that we're going to have another Arctic blast and it's going to be really bad by not having something like that in my car. If you're in a part of the country, and that's definitely anybody north of the Tennessee line, you need to have a big heavy sleeping bag in that car with that other bag that I just described as well, in the trunk or something out of the way, for in case, for every person that's going to be there. So what I recommend people do is I have my sleeping bag and then I have my little emergency bag of my clothing, etc. If we're going to be going on my wife's car and we're going on one of these trips, I'll transfer that into the trunk of her car, because it already has in her car her bag and her sleeping bag. See? And so if we get out here on one of these back roads or county roads or whatever and the car breaks down, and hey, we'll go back to that phone, click. If you can get a signal, if you can get a hold of somebody to come get you. Many times in cities that's easy, but a lot of times, again, when you're out in the county and you're in just sheriff's jurisdiction, who's coming to get you? See, many times when you do make contact, you dial 911 and you'll end up with some really small little town that has a volunteer fire department and a volunteer rescue squad, and the deputy on call or the officer on call is at home in bed when you wake him up and tell him I'm broke down, and he don't have GPS location, so you better know where you're at. So look up on your phone and be ready ahead of time, say that I'm at such and such mile marker on such and such county road and I've broken down. You know, I need a wrecker or something to get me out of this. I'm in a bad situation. But even then, how long until they get to you? Might be hours, and especially if it's bad weather conditions where they just can't get to you. You need to be able to buy time and shelter in place. And so that big bag right there will allow me to shelter in place and be okay for 24 hours. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need something to drink. Now, usually when we're going on trips, everybody's going to have a soda or something like that. But always have a little extra with you. And one of the things I like to keep in a vehicle is I take a couple of 2-liter bottles and fill it 3/4 of the way up. You know, I've sterilized the bottle, of course. But by doing that, if I've left it in my car and it freezes, it doesn't bust the bottle, it can expand inside the bottle, see? So that water will be okay. I can utilize it. Food, you need something to nibble on. Now this is the emergency bag for this vehicle. In it there's an MRE, there's some other stuff, fire making kits, etc. And the basis of what I would have like a haversack equivalent right there. Or a Blackbird haversack wouldn't be a bad idea to carry in there, would it? Shameless plug. And so with this, I've got all my necessities. So if I do have to get out of the car and build a fire or whatever, or something, I've got something to nibble on. These lifeboat rations, like you pick up at Walmart, relatively cheap, are a good thing because they're very calorie dense. They don't taste bad, but they don't taste that good. And what does that mean? You're not going to nibble on them until you got to. Okay. A friend of mine, he carried because he's a diabetic and he has to have to eat. He's hypoglycemic like I am, so I have to have food intake or my blood sugar gets a little screwy. And so he came up with a little bag and he put Snickers and he put stuff like that in and he put it back behind the seat. Well, he's got 3 teenage kids. And about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after he'd put that bag in there, 6 months, he decided it's time to rotate it. So he brought the bag out and didn't have a single candy bar or nothing in that car. He hadn't eaten any of them. And so when he confronted his teenage kids, well, I got hungry and I knew you had Snickers in there. And so they'd eaten all his candy bars because it was something good to eat. He replaced it with something like this because he needs sugar. He's got hard candy for that. But he went and got something like this because that way nobody just nibbles on it. You know, this is when I really got to have something. You'll nibble on this. It doesn't taste bad, and it isn't moisture. It isn't thirst invoking. So it's something I can just nibble on to give me some calories to help keep me warm, because those blankets, those sleeping bags, those etc. do not produce any heat. You produce the heat. So if your body heat is dropped down because you hadn't eaten in the last 8 hours and you ain't got nothing to kind of stoke that fire back up, I carry the ability to make coffee, tea, or something like that. So I can get off out of the car and do it. And you know those MRE heaters? Those are a great thing to have in an emergency kit because I can add a little bottled water to it, set it in the floorboard propped up against something, and make hot coffee, hot chocolate with an MRE heater inside the car. Just crack the window a little bit without having to get out. That is very handy. So, in conclusion, have some emergency gear, because I know you're not used to it. I know it's not something you're common, but people in Alaska, Canada, northern Idaho, they're used to this. They go prepared. They have kits and stuff in their car for such extremes. In the lower 48, we don't think about that. But that's the point. One, you're not acclimated to this cold. So whenever this cold snap rolls in, you're not acclimated. Two, you're probably wearing street clothes that's a hoodie and a thin little shirt and thin little pants, thin little socks, because you're going to be in an office all day or you're just in and out. You don't have anything on to insulate. You're not wearing the layers. So that bag of some extra clothing that I can put on over the top, or a nice extra thick jacket that as soon as winter hits, I just keep it in the back of the car, could be a lifesaver. Next, the fact that even though you do nothing wrong, you can still be stranded because of environmental conditions, because ice conditions, trees falling, or like that I-95 where you're just stuck here. And although you could move, you're completely encapsulated by other vehicles and you can't get out and go anywhere. So having something, you know, to help keep you warm is a good thing. Next, that big sleeping bag or etc. that all four of us are going in your car and we're going to grandma's in upstate, then all four of us need to get our go bags and put into the trunk to have to carry up there. Whenever we get home, we pull the go bag back out and it goes into our individual cars again. because if we got stuck up here in these conditions, it could be bad. And I've got a good friend of mine. He's a big-time prepper, and he's got a great vehicle set up. And he was going over it with me and showing me everything he's got. And I asked him, I said, well, yeah, you're very well prepared, but you've got a wife and 2 kids. Yeah. I don't see any provision for them. You've got a really good this and really good that, but only you can wear it. Your wife can't wear it that. It's way too big for this. You don't have an additional sleeping bag or nothing. So when this bad thing happens, you're going to have your wife and 2 kids in the back seat of that double cab truck in your sleeping bag wearing your clothes, and you're going to be freezing up here. Because you're going to sit and be all nice and warm watching your kids freeze? Think this through, guys. Same thing in the summer. You should have water. You should have one of the emergency space blankets. So if my car breaks down, I can flip that thing around with the shiny sides up to reflect heat off of the car and off of me, so I can get out of that heat. Environmental is the threes. The rule of threes is, as you know, 3 seconds without thinking, 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours of exposure. That's the big one. I can kill you in that car in 3 hours in the right conditions. But you can hedge your bet by simply having a few little items like this to put in the back of the car. It's no big whoop, you know, it's a sleeping bag. It's a Ranger roll. It's a small bag with some food, water, and things for me to make a fire and etc. If I have to get out of the car, and right there I could get right over in that ditch and make a fire, you know, to be able to heat me up something, or just all of that in such a small little thing can save your life. And that's the #1 thing. Think the problem through, provide for everybody that's going to be involved. Hope you enjoyed this, guys. Please hit that like button if you do, and subscribe if you haven't. I'd really appreciate it. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.